Nobody's debating if he was a good player. He was a good player. Fred McGriff was a good player too. Let's look at these mystery players I put together and some of their stats, and you tell me who definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame and who does not. Okay, player A, 18 seasons. All three guys are at the same position. 18 seasons, 3-time All-Star, career WAR of 32, 386 home runs. So the most out of any of those three players, the 386. Okay. The batting average, 283. So highest batting average of any of those players. Silver Slugger, RBI-wise, 1,400. Leads the list there, too. Mm-hmm. So fewest All-Star appearances, but highest batting average, most RBIs, and most home runs. Most seasons as well. Player B, 17 seasons, 7-time All-Star, by far the highest WAR at 70, 316 homers, so you're talking like 70 homers less, 8 Gold Gloves. There's one you don't see necessarily with the other ones. Player C, though, has 5 Gold Gloves. Okay, interesting. And then also a 70 WAR, 9-time All-Star.
9-time All-Star.
Who are
9-time All-Stars in less seasons, too.
Two of those three are Hall of Famers. One is not.
Okay. Okay, is the first one Harold Baines?
First one is not Harold Baines. All three players are the same position here.
You're wanting us to guess these, right?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
All right, you ready for the big reveal? Joey's on the ones and twos. He's back from France, by the way.
Wow.
Aramis Ramirez is pretty damn close to Ron Santo and Scott Rolen. Now, I look at those numbers, and I don't say in any way, shape, or form. Okay, player A was Aramis Ramirez.
That's
18
three-time
season,
All-Star,
3-time All-Star. His WAR, half of basically what Rolen's is, but he's got more home runs, a better batting average, and more RBIs, and played one extra season. I'm not going to compare him to Ron Santo. I just wanted Santo to be in there because Santo's a guy that they kept out of the Hall of Fame until he died, which was criminal.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So the fact that Ron Santo wasn't in the Hall of Fame, and you look at his numbers next to Scott Rolen, you go, what? Like, he was a 9-time All-Star. Now, there's some numbers that I didn't put on these graphics that are really telling you the two. I'm just telling you, when I look at Aramis Ramirez and Scott Rolen with the stats that are on that graphic, I'm not telling you Aramis Ramirez is a Hall of Famer. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling you the numbers aren't crazy different. And I've never heard anybody say Aramis Ramirez should be in the Hall of Fame. So are you telling me it's just Gold Gloves that?
I think that's what's putting them over the top.
Well,
sure.
But I'm just saying, have you ever heard anybody say Aramis Ramirez should be in the Hall of Fame?
No.
Well, as Tim said earlier, the defense, as far as WAR goes, defense really helps in that. Like it factors in a lot to overall wins above replacement. And I mean, I guess when looking at that and looking at what Ron Santo's case was, and clearly he was the deserving Hall of Famer, Scott Rolen isn't that far off. Like that kind of makes me lean even more towards Scott Rolen.
Sure, agreed. His numbers are similar to Ron Santo. My point is just like
it's not as insane.
They waited till Ron Santo died.
Yeah.
Before they finally put him in.
Yes.
I mean, the ballot was probably tougher though.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a different era too. Like even comparing the home runs and stuff is very difficult. Now, these are the stats that I think are really interesting. First place votes and MVP votes, okay?
Okay.
This is one that doesn't do much for Scott Rolen. Scott Rolen, in his 17 seasons, had one first place vote for MVP. In 17 seasons, he got one vote for MVP. He only finished in the top 10 of baseball for MVP 4 times. 4 times in his whole 17-season career did he finish in the top 10 for MVP. Aramis Ramirez, 3 top 10 finishes for MVP in his career.
Would not.
Aramis was more of an MVP, according to those votes, than Scott Rolen was. Aramis was got some sort of vote for MVP in the National League 5 different seasons. Again, I'm not saying Aramis Ramirez is a Hall of Famer. I'm just telling you, if you're telling me a guy wasn't even, only 1 season did he get votes.
Yeah.
And then you look at Ron Santo, and this is where you separate Santo from Scott Rolen because you don't have to compare home runs and RBIs with the game changes. It's different. But if you're comparing him to his peers and the guys he's playing against, now remember, he's playing with guys like Ernie Banks. He's playing against the glory players of baseball, the best of the best, right? Ron Santo didn't have any first place votes, but he finished in the top 10 4 different times and in the top 5 twice. Scott Rolen can't touch that. Can't touch that.
Rolen was also Rookie of the Year, though, and he in the World Series in 06, he hit, 420 it says right here. So, I don't know how much that has to do with it. I think Ramirez, when you put those 3 up there, I had no idea that would be Aramis Ramirez. It's pretty interesting to see that.
And I wasn't even seeking it out. I just thought to myself, who else played third base a lot during that era? Yeah. And then I'm like, well, Aramis played a lot. He had a lot of home runs. Let me look at the 2 numbers. Mm-hmm. Again, if I look at the two resumes, I would say Scott Rolen is the Hall of Famer, especially because of the Gold Glove. Much better fielder.
I'll tell you right now.
I just don't think they're that different.
If we're having this conversation 20 years ago, Ramirez probably has a lot better of a shot at getting in comparison to Rolen. Because, the home runs, that was such a big difference a long time ago. Now it's WAR isn't the be-all, end-all of getting into the Hall of Fame, but a lot of voters do use that for, to help just kind of to put in perspective how good these players were on both sides of the ball, especially compared to, their contemporary players, all that stuff. So the fact that we're talking about it in 2023 now, and Aramis Ramirez's WAR was so far below Scott Rolen's, is a huge, impediment to Aramis Ramirez
Scott
ever
Rolen's
getting
better
Hall of
player.
Fame.
Eyeball test, Scott Rolen better player than Aramis Ramirez.
As an overall player.
Yeah.
For a hitter, though, pretty similar, like Stuckey said.
But that's the whole thing.
The MVP vote thing is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, also, during that era, Albert Pujols was the best player on the planet, so Scott Rolen wasn't looked at as the guy.
I was going to ask.
Aramis Ramirez was looked at as the guy during his peak years with the Cubs.
That's what I was looking at. I was thinking about did Scott Rolen maybe get overlooked as a piece of those really, really good Cardinals teams for because he spent 6 seasons in St. Louis, was on that World Series team, was also on that that 04 team that got swept by the Red Sox, the teams that kept winning the Central that whole decade. Did Scott Rolen get overlooked just because he was on the same team as Albert Pujols? Jim Edmonds was at his peak at that point. I mean, Chris Carpenter was still pitching. Yadier Molina was at the beginning of his career.
This isn't a Cardinals podcast.
He's not allowed on this podcast. Here's another guy. Here's one other guy's stats that I threw in there. 22 seasons, WAR 38.8, similar to Aramis. 384 home runs, 289 batting average, 6-time All-Star. The most RBIs at 1,600. 0 top 10 finishes for MVP, had votes in 4 different seasons. Who is it? Harold Baines, Hall of Fame.
There you go.
So, again, I don't personally care who's in the Hall of Fame, but if you're telling me that Harold Baines is a Hall of Famer and you're not even talking about Aramis Ramirez, guys, you should just have a Hall of Good, a Hall of Great guys, a Hall of this era. It's starting to become a little bit ridiculous, and it's disappointing to me because I think of all the Hall of Fames, the Baseball Hall of Fame is the one that I actually respect. Other sports just seem to put anybody in there. And so I liked the fact that the Baseball Hall of Fame held it to this high credibility. You had to be the all-time greats in that sport. And so that's why, is Aramis Ramirez a Hall of Famer? No. But I'm not sure that Scott Rolen is a Hall of Famer. I'm not sure that Harold Baines is a Hall of Famer. And I don't know what to make out of the steroid guys. They're clearly the greatest players of that era. Some of them probably whether or not they took the steroids.
Yeah. To me, whether you think they're deserving or not, specifically the ones you're talking about, it's tough to look at it for the baseball writers to only decide that only Scott Rolen, of all the guys on that ballot, only Scott Rolen
is on that ballot.
That's to me, because you want to talk about credibility and integrity. Well, okay, you're not going to let steroid guys in, but you're going to let David Ortiz, Jeff Bagwell, Pudge Rodriguezson, all 3 guys were linked to steroids at one point in their career.
Pudge is a great example.
Right? Like,
Pudge follows me on Twitter.
Just to
Oh,
me,
yeah?
Yes,
to me,
that's-
this
that was
integrity
funny.
thing is just makes me want to throw up, honestly. So, I'm with you, Luke. Like, I don't really care anymore because, like, it doesn't make any sense. That to me, it comes down to who the writers just liked. That's just how, like, you let David Ortiz in because he was like a fan favorite. His personality was awesome, but also linked to steroids.
That's right.
But like, we're not gonna let these other guys in. And I know I'm going back to the steroids thing, but this is why Luke feels the way he does, though, because they're letting some of these other guys in who you can argue are borderline, but you didn't let the guys who clearly dominated an era in. And to me, someone looking through my lens is just kind of like, all right, well then what's the point of this? Like, we're just here to clap for some guy for getting in because we had to get someone in. Like, it's just like a bunch of nonsense.